President Bola Tinubu says freedom of expression must be strengthened, not sabotaged in Nigeria's democracy, urging editors to wield their influence with fairness and national responsibility. Speaking at the 21st All Nigeria Editors Conference, President Tinubu pledged to act on calls for stronger protection of press freedom. On the same platform, media leaders warned that democracy itself is at risk, given that many Nigerian newsrooms are struggling to survive under the weight of rising cost of production. State House correspondent Adesua Omoruan reports.
It was the first of its kind. Over 400 editors inside the presidential villa, face-to-face with the country's leader. The theme was bold: democratic governance and national cohesion, the role of editors ahead of the 2027 elections. After months of economic pressure and newsroom closures, editors came not to beg, but to insist that journalism must survive if democracy is to endure.
A free, responsible, and vibrant press remains the lifeblood of any democracy. When the press thrives, democracy breathes. When the press is stifled, democracy suffocates.
The Guild laid out concrete demands, including corporate tax relief, repeal of laws that inhibit press freedoms, VAT exemptions on media inputs, tax credits to encourage advertising, low-interest loans, and a media development fund to speed digital transition. For them, it's not sympathy, but survival. Then came the keynote that flipped the conversation. Imo State Governor Hope Uzodinma turned the challenge back on the journalists, saying editors themselves will shape whether 2027 becomes a test or a triumph for democracy.
You are not spectators in 2027. You are active participants. You are catalysts and facilitators. Whether you acknowledge it or not, the narratives you shape between now and the election will determine whether Nigerians approach 2027 with hope or cynicism, with trust or suspicion, with a sense of shared stake or through a tribal lens. I'm not asking you to become a propagandist for the state. I'm rather asking you to become custodians of information integrity, which sits well with electoral integrity.
He warns that sensational headlines have deepened public distrust and urges editors to rebuild credibility before voters return to the polls. Other speakers agree truth, not clicks, must drive coverage of Nigeria's democracy.
The government of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has demonstrated its faith in you through his actions, not just his words. We invite you, therefore, to engage, to critique constructively, and to report with utmost responsibility that demands your participation at this moment of our history. The best editor is the one that knows what not to report.
President Tinubu acknowledges the media's historic role in defending democracy from colonial times to military rule, but urges the nation's editors to wield that freedom responsibly. He's warning against narratives that undermine national cohesion and confidence in the nation.
A democracy is sustained not only by elections and laws, but also by the integrity of the public conversation. This is where your role becomes central and indispensable as last man standing. I urge you, therefore, to continue upholding the highest standard of journalism. Report boldly, but do so truthfully. Criticize government policy, but do so with knowledge and fairness. Your aim must never be to tear down what we are building together, but to help build a better society.
Beyond the speeches, the conference went into technical sessions on electoral disputes, judicial integrity, and how the media can reinforce trust in Nigeria's democracy before 2027. This historic engagement is proof the government and media can disagree without hostility. even as the president promises to study the editor's proposals from VAT relief to reform of restrictive laws. Adesoa Omoruan, Arise News.
Well, thank you, Adesoa. Now, still at that conference where he served as co-chairman, the chairman and editor-in-chief of Arise and This Day Media Group, Prince Nduka Obiagbena, highlighted the need for editors and publishers to play a crucial role in safeguarding Nigeria's hard-won economic stability of the past 2 years. He called for a coalition of willing minds to safeguard reforms, tackle insecurity, and strengthen the country against potential sanctions by the United States.
Head of State, General Sani Abacha, as we sat in one of the conference rooms of the FEC, the soldiers walked to us and said to us, Ken Saro-Wiwa has just been executed. That was 30 years ago under military dictatorship. So 30 years after, we are here celebrating engagement with the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. So I thought we must understand why democracy matters, why we must engage, why we must sustain democracy for the greater good of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. There are three leaders who were media owners who had had the fortune of leading Nigeria one way or the other. The first was Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe, who was the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, head of state without being head of government. The second is Chief Obafemi Awolowo, who was leader of opposition and later deputy chairman of the Federal Executive Council under Gowon. The third is President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, who is both leader of government and head of state. So we've had the fortune of having a media owner as head of state. Therefore, hosting us today is an advancement of that. Therefore, it means we have to engage, we have to discuss, and we have to understand ourselves. We are at the crossroad of reforms, which has been hard and hard fought. And now we stand on the gates of stability. We must protect that economic stability with everything we have. Because if we lose the current stability, we lose the sacrifices of the last 2 years. It therefore means that collectively, we cannot allow a US sanction. Because a US sanction will destabilize the economy and bring us all back to the time before the reforms. What does that mean? It means we must engage. It means we must build a coalition of the willing to defeat terrorism and insecurity and defeat poverty.
Well, Mr. Steve.
A beautiful, beautiful outing for the Nigerian Guild of Editors on Wednesday and Thursday in the Federal Capital Territory, the city of Abuja. When you saw that I made reference to the cows on the street, you know, the other time when we were discussing about Wike, it was because that was something that I witnessed, you know, and that won't be the first time. But let's talk Guild, because this is a subject that is very important to me. As a fellow of the Nigerian Guild of Editors who has had the good fortune across 2 decades to have served that guild in different capacities as Assistant Secretary General, as Vice President West, and as deputy president, who also chairs the membership committee now, I was proud on Wednesday when the president, with his team and different other people received more than 400 editors in the State House on the opening day of our conference. It was not meant to be the venue because the Guild had already built the NAF conference center. But of course, when it became obvious that the president would be available to host and speak to editors, we agreed to shift the first day of the conference to the State House. It won't be the first time that a Nigerian president will be meeting with journalists and editors in the State House. I recall that in June of 2018,
yes.
late President Muhammadu Buhari also hosted the IPI, International Press Institute, Congress for that year. It was the 67th edition, which Nigeria hosted, first time ever, I believe, in Africa. He also did like this. But that was not the platform of the Nigerian Guild of Editors. For 21 years that the All Editors Conference has been holding, this is the first time on Wednesday that a sitting president will receive the editors. And I do commend very warmly the Eze Anaba-led ESCO of the Guild of Editors for pulling that off. But it wasn't just about the symbolism of it. I think what is also very important is the quality of attendance and the quality of submissions. And you could see from what the president said, from what the honorable minister said, and also from what our chairman, Prince Ndukau Baigbina, said. The president was clear about the fact that, I'm not averse to criticism. But what I'm saying is that when you come criticizing policies or individuals in government, do so with knowledge and fairness. It's basically saying that this is what the ethics of the profession, requires. No point going personal. No point trying to tear down the fabric of the country, of the society, just because a few people might not necessarily agree with certain policies of government or with certain individuals in government. And I thought that that was an important thing, to say, to remind journalists who sometimes might want to go overboard, stay with the issues, and criticize, for all that you may want, because it helps society. But he's saying that in doing so, do so with knowledge and do so with fairness. And I think that that's a standard, ethical requirement in our job. If you move to what our chairman has said, I think he basically said three important things there. First is to remind the people in attendance that this is the first time that you will have a president, who is a media owner, who is a publisher, who is into television and into newspapering. Yes, we had Nnamdi Azikiwe at the time, but the chairman was clear about saying that he was head of government, but then, not the head of state as at that time. He mentioned Chief Obafemi Awolowo, who never, quite, become the president. And then, I probably didn't mention MK Abiola, but we also know that because he was publisher of Concord, he won an election that he was not allowed, to prosecute, to rule. And then we're back to the era of a strategic politician who also has interest in the media. And that when we are speaking to him about press freedom, and like Eze Anaba, the president of the Guild, said, that this profession is sinking and it needs a lot of rescue. Prince Obagbena is saying that we have a president who should understand, because he's also into this business. It won't matter that he's been governor and now is president. Part of what he claims within his portfolio as a businessman, are the media businesses that he runs, and that he shouldn't allow the larger ecosystem of the media to go down. And the request that the president of the Guild therefore made to him, the president did say that, your requests are in my pocket, I will take a look at them. So Prince Obagbena is saying that, take a look at them because you are also involved in this profession. The second thing that he said, which was also important, is that because of the gains that we have made at a time that we are at a serious juncture, that we are dealing with issues arising from insecurity, terrorism, and the threat from the United States. He says, don't let this country go down because we have invested so much. So everything that it will require, either from the part of government or we as media professionals, to ensure that we defeat the enemy America may not be the enemy. In fact, America is not the enemy. Let's defeat the enemy so that we won't create a situation where sanctions will come from America. And we know the enemies, the terrorists, their sponsors, their collaborators, the bandits, the kidnappers. Those are the enemies that we must defeat. And of course, the other part will be the thing that is coming in January. Leke, as the birdie girl, would like to pronounce it. And many people may not know that the very first column that Prince Obagbena wrote, many decades ago was called Leke. And therefore, we now have Leke returning almost 40 years or thereabout after, as a platform that is designed, to compete and possibly rescue, the African continent when it comes to, fighting for space. This is the AI, fighting for space in media platform. And I think that is something that many Nigerians will look forward to. So in January, when Leke bird will fly in all its glory, we'll be happy to support, and I'm sure that Nigerians will welcome it very well. Those were the issues that cropped up in Abuja and, of course, on the platform of the Nigerian Guild of Editors.
Definitely. I just going off of what you said, that there are two key things to highlight and to also go off of on is the responsibility of journalists to be fair. But to be fair and to be knowledgeable in the criticisms. But it's also the responsibility of government and government officials to take it with in good faith when we are criticizing. For example, if we talk about what we spoke about earlier with the trash lining the streets of Abuja, with the green areas disappearing, a lot of members of the political class can't understand it because there's AC in their car. They're not smelling it the way you might be smelling it if you don't have AC in your car and you're winding down. They're not feeling the heat in the same way because there's AC in their houses or there's AC in their cars. They don't live in the same realities. They're possibly not driving themselves. I've had conversations with people in government and I was complaining and they said that you can't complain about the situation. It's Mr. Projects. Everything is so nice. Isn't the road nice? And I said, but we all drove here. There are no street lights, but you all have a driver. And so you don't understand, you don't understand the realities of people. What the average, and even I'm lucky because I'm still driving. If I'm driving myself, I'm still driving. There are people who are walking on these streets without street lights, who are being victims, and using public transport, and who are now being victimized, victims of crime because of the lack of us paying attention to detail. And so when we criticize, we don't do it because we love the spotlight or we love politics. We do it because we love our country. We don't hate the politicians. Some people might, but that's not our job. Our job is to criticize responsibly with the knowledge we have, with the understanding of what a functional system and what a functional place looks like, because we love our country and we want better for our country. And I think that really ties into the chairman of This Day and Arise Media Group, the visionary Prince Obagbena, because as you said, his first column, I've had conversations about this with leaders who saw it then when he was in, and it was Benin City there, right? Yes. And he has always been a proponent of African voices telling African stories, of being authentic, being well researched and authentic and highlighting the intersections of our various identities. And I think he's been able to build a beautiful and a media space here where we are not, you're from this tribe or you're from this person or you speak this language or you do this. It's that you hone in on your talent, your skills, your knowledge base, and you tell authentic stories from our perspective, whether it's in Egypt or New York or Saudi Arabia, wherever it is that Africa should not be left behind by anyone and that our voices matter, and giving it a platform to elevate those voices to the global stage is something that should truly be commended. So we're looking forward to
Leke. All right, moving on to other matters. The federal government this week cancelled the national policy which stipulates the use of indigenous languages as the medium of instruction in schools. Minister of Education, Dr. Tunji Alausa, stated this at the 2025 Language in Education International Conference organized by the British Council in Abuja. In 2022, the federal government approved a national language policy which stipulates that from early childhood education to primary 6, the language of instruction will be in the mother tongue or the language of the immediate community. The policy aims to promote indigenous languages, recognize their equal status, and improve early childhood learning outcomes, while English remains the official language used in later education and formal settings. Now, interesting development there, Adesua. You know, when this news came out, you know, during the week, where the Honorable Minister Tunji Alausa spoke, incidentally, within the British Council premises, you know, it took me by surprise. But then it's a subject matter that one will have to dissect very carefully, because I recall in 2022, when the former Education Minister Adamu Adamu, you know, brought out that policy. And I recall that views were very divergent, and a lot of people were worried about how will this pan out? How will you deal with the challenges? How will you deal with a number of pupils or students in a particular community or state who are not naturally from that state, who will now be mandated, you know, to go through school in the language of that community, which therefore means that if you were coming from Benin or Anambra or Kano and you reside in Ibadan or Lagos, because Yoruba is the primary language, you know, in those communities, you require that if that policy were to fully take off, that is what will be used to teach pupils and students and everything. On the surface of it, it's an ideal policy that everybody should support. But then when you now look at the workability of it, and I think that this is what we have seen in barely 3 years, I knew, and a lot of people have said it, that this would be a tough thing to pull off. So it looks to me like, having looked at all the variables, Dr. Tunji Alausa, speaking for the federal government, said that, look, don't let us be emotional about this thing. This has got nothing to do with not encouraging local languages and dialects. But when it comes to using it as a language, as a tool to teach, to impart knowledge, because of the things that it will require, changing books, changing curriculum into different local languages. Not like you are changing it to Yoruba, Hausa, or Igbo, even though those three will have an advantage. So he says that it really cannot work, and that we should accept that this time around it can work. It won't be a popular decision, but of course you know that it will be an emotional response that people will give. Maybe what we should therefore do is to continue to encourage the teaching of local languages, as we had it before 2022 in schools. The teaching of history, which, you know, thankfully is back in most schools now, encouraging programs like Maso Imbo, for example, which has been quite popular in the last 1.5 years in Nigeria, encouraging even State House of Assembly, like the Lagos State House of Assembly did the other time, with an example to say that on Thursdays, every Thursday, we will conduct the affairs of the house in Yoruba language. Maybe those at least can show up support for our heritage, which language represent. If what we are forced to accept is the fact that, hey, maybe we're not ready to be like the South Koreans, to be like the Japanese and the Chinese, because they have the advantage of a single language kind of situation. Unlike here, where there are more than 250 languages and dialects, 3 dominant ones, but then how you deal with it will be very, very challenging.
Very challenging, definitely. As you said, the practical, how we work this is very important. But I'm not entirely sure it's about the languages themselves. And you said it would be a very unpopular policy, because we look at the history of language in Nigeria and speaking indigenous languages, where you take it back to colonization and people being punished for speaking their own indigenous language.
Vernacular.
Well, yes, I've never heard that before. I had never heard that before, but it's something that had then been entrenched into our culture. And so in this, in a time to reclaim our identity, reclaim our languages, and reclaim our culture in a world where we're losing languages. Nigeria is losing languages. We've been quoting the same number for years, but some of these languages are no longer spoken, right? And so, so you can't know yourself if you can't speak your language.
Absolutely.
I think there's a lot that is missing if you can only speak English, and it's very important that we're talking about primary education here. We're not talking about like the secondary school and the maybe complex subjects. It's primary education, getting people to be able to read and write, understand numeracy, very simple stuff. But I think our problem goes deeper than our language. And I don't think the issue is the language, because if we go back to 2017, very famous case of El-Rufai as governor of Kaduna, firing over 20,000 teachers because they failed exams that you give 6-year-olds. And you go back to just what happened, and I'm bringing us to what happened in the House of Representatives on Thursday, because on Thursday, the House of Representatives has told WAEC to stop and hold on computer-based testing. And they've said it's because we're not ready. There's a poor teacher training, poor equipment. Some of these students are expected to take multiple exams on computers, but in practice, they have never used exams.
They've never used it, particularly students in public schools.
Exactly, and rural areas. And then some of their teachers have not used it. And so I think there's a way that these policies were put in place, because 3 years is a short time to come and to truly assess it. And I'm not saying that the minister is wrong or right in his submissions, but I think 3 years is a short period of time, especially when we think about the significance here of it being something that's culturally significant and necessary for us to maintain our language and our identity as a people. However, also we don't want Nigerian children to fall so far behind their peers internationally. So it is a very dicey situation. But I do think that it goes beyond the language. We need to really come together and talk about teacher training. We need to come together and talk about equipping rural areas. Beyond the language in which they are teaching these children, are the teachers even equipped to do so? Or do they just know how to speak the language? So they said this one is going to teach primary 3 to 5, but does not actually understand how to instruct young children. So I think those are some of the issues that we're facing beyond just the language itself.
But I think that the minister should also clarify that the policy that they are dispensing with is not the policy that mandates that students must at least take one of the top 3 Nigerian languages, so that they don't conflict, what is going on. What they have said is that the policy of 2022 that requires a local language to be used can no longer proceed. Even though I would have preferred that they would have been silent about it and then move on to see how these things pan out. But to just come and say, oh, we're no longer doing, I'm not so sure that was the best way to go about it. But
I think sometimes we talk about the flip-flopping we see in Nigerian political space. They announce one thing one day, they